Before ordinary teenagers vanish from their world and awaken in a dying land cursed by ancient monsters and forgotten gods. Bound to mythical relics that grant terrifying power, they are forced to fight for the survival of kingdoms torn apart by a colossal creature known as the Fellwyrm, a living memory of the world's greatest sin. As they journey across shattered landscapes, face legendary villains, and uncover the truth behind a broken crown, they must confront not just monsters, but their own guilt, fear, and the weight of destiny. But when the final choice arrives to save the world or destroy what's left, they learn that true power isn't magic, it's memory. The Crown of the Fellwyrm is a breathtaking fantasy adventure filled with epic battles, emotional scars, and a world that refuses to be forgotten. The forest had always been their place of peace. The rustling trees, the winding trails, the smell of pine and moss clinging to the mountain air. It was familiar, calming. Just outside the city limits, beyond the concrete sprawl and clamor of their teenage lives, lay a realm untouched by time. That was why Alex suggested they hike there. One last adventure before the school year ended. No Wi-Fi, no alarms, just them, their backpacks, and the world beneath their boots. But none of them could have guessed that this particular hike would be the last moment their lives would ever feel normal again. It was Alex who led the way, tall, tanned, and always a step ahead of everyone. His boundless energy matched only by his reckless sense of courage. He'd grown up with a military father who rarely smiled and a string of towns that never felt like home. Hiking, exploring, taking risks. That was how Alex made himself feel real. He wore his fearlessness like a badge, even when he was faking it. Behind him, Jade followed with sharp eyes and a quietly focused stride. She was the brain of the group, with a mind wired for logic and a heart armored by years of disappointment. Her mother worked 2 jobs, her father was gone, and the weight of being the responsible one had buried her softer parts somewhere deep. She didn't believe in prophecies or magic or destiny, only in facts. That day, she carried a topographical map in one hand and a compass in the other, even though they were on a marked trail. Trailing a few steps behind was Ryan, the group's emotional glue. He was the kind of guy who made everyone laugh, even when things fell apart. Chubby, cheerful, with a goofy grin and a heart that bruised easily, Ryan had always struggled to be taken seriously. At school, he was either invisible or the punchline. But with this group, his best friends, he mattered. He brought marshmallows and energy bars, and his backpack rattled with supplies, just in case. And finally, there was May, the quiet one, the dreamer, the artist. Small and soft-spoken, she often walked with her gaze tilted to the canopy above, as if trying to read the language of the leaves. Her sketchbook was tucked into the side of her pack, its pages filled with drawings of creatures and castles that no one else believed in. May was the newest member of the group, the outsider at school who somehow found her way in. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when she did, her words always held strange weight. They reached the summit by late afternoon, a clearing near a jagged cliff that offered a breathtaking view of the valley below. The sky stretched wide and cloudless, the sunlight painting golden edges onto the distant hills. The group dropped their bags, laughed, stretched their legs. For a while, they simply breathed in the beauty of it all. But then it happened, swift and silent, like something the world itself was trying to hide. Jade noticed it first, the shift in the air, a prickling sensation crawling up her spine like static. "Do you feel that?" she asked, frowning. The others paused. Even Alex, usually too eager to dismiss things, looked uneasy. The wind had died. The birds were gone. The world held its breath. Then the sky cracked. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't thunder. It was something else. A jagged line of light tore through the sky like shattered glass. It shimmered, vibrated, and spiraled downward, twisting into a swirling vortex of color and sound. A rift, portal, a rip in the fabric of reality itself. Alex stepped forward instinctively, shielding the others even as his heart pounded. "What the hell is that?" Ryan shouted. "Is it a storm? We should run." But they didn't get the chance. The ground beneath their feet rippled. Not shook, not cracked, but rippled like water, and then it dropped. The cliff edge gave way, and all 4 teens plunged into a void of light and wind and impossible sound. They fell not into the valley, but into the sky itself. A sky that wasn't theirs, painted with constellations they had never seen and moons that didn't belong. Their screams vanished into the roar of the vortex. Everything became a blur, and then silence. They landed one by one, scattered across a soft, grassy hillside that seemed too green, too vibrant, too unreal to exist. The sky above them was tinted a deep violet, with 2 suns hanging low and distant mountains that floated like islands. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of strange flowers and ozone. Birds, no creatures, with feathered horns soared overhead, calling in tones that sounded like echoes through time. Alex stirred first. He groaned, rubbed the back of his head, and sat up. "Anyone dead?" he called out, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. He didn't feel brave anymore. Ryan was nearby, face down in the grass. "I think my spleen exploded," he groaned. Jade sat up slowly, shaking. "This isn't possible. This can't be real. Where are we?" May said nothing. She stood on a rock a few feet away, her eyes wide and shimmering. Her mouth was slightly open in awe, and for the first time since joining the group, she spoke without hesitation. "I dreamed this once," she whispered. "Years ago." The others turned to her, confused and alarmed. But before anyone could question further, they heard it. Distant hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Drums. Horns. The sound of pursuit. From the woods beyond the hill, riders emerged. Not modern soldiers, not police. Knights, mounted on strange lizard-like beasts, clad in armor of emerald and bronze, their weapons gleaming with runes. The leader raised a gauntlet and shouted something in a language none of the teens recognized. Then, another voice responded, closer. A man stepped into view from the tree-line, silver-haired and tall, with a deep scar running down the side of his face. His cloak was torn, his sword drawn. He looked directly at the teens with something between awe and fear in his eyes. "They've returned," he said in perfect English. "The skyborn heirs." The prophecy was true. The knights behind him knelt, and just like that, the world shifted. They had no time to speak, to run, or to even question what had just happened. The man with the silver hair, his face lined with age and war, his eyes carrying a kind of grief that weighed the air around him, moved swiftly. With a sharp gesture, he barked a command in the foreign tongue, and several of the mounted knights leapt into action. 2 dismounted and approached the teens with urgency, though not with hostility. Their armor clinked and hissed with some kind of gentle magic woven into the metal. The leader, the scarred man, stepped forward again, this time more cautiously, as if afraid the children before him might vanish. "I am Sir Thalen, Warden of the Hollow," he said. His voice was calm but strained, like someone trying to remember how to speak a language he had learned long ago. "You are not what I expected, but the signs are clear." None of the teens responded right away. They stood in silence, absorbing not only the words but the world around them. The reality of it, the weight, the smells, the way the light moved, made denial impossible. This wasn't some elaborate prank or dream. This was a world, one with its own gravity, its own air, its own sky. Jade, who never let herself believe in anything without evidence, opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She had no theory to fall back on. Logic had abandoned her. Ryan broke the silence first. Okay, so we fell through the sky and now there are lizard horses and guys with swords and everyone's kneeling like we're royalty or something. Does anyone else feel like they're having a panic attack? Or is it just me? Alex looked at Sir Thalen. "Where are we?" The knight answered with a single word, "Valdrian." It meant nothing to them, and yet, the way he said it, it felt like it should. A name with weight, with sorrow, with history. The moment didn't last. A second horn blast echoed in the distance, this one sharper, angrier. Sir Thalen's eyes darkened. "The beasts are moving again. We must leave this place." "What beasts?" Jade asked warily, but he didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to his knights. Bring them, with respect, quickly. Despite their confusion, the teens didn't resist. Something about the man's urgency, and the way the land itself seemed to tremble under their feet, demanded trust, or at least obedience. They were guided onto the strange mounts, which smelled like a mixture of wet moss and charcoal, and had scales instead of fur. Their eyes were deep and reptilian, but strangely gentle. As the caravan turned east, the hill they had landed on shrank behind them, and the sun began its descent. They rode for hours, through rolling meadows and fog-slicked woods, the trees growing taller and more ancient with every mile. Twilight fell, and a soft mist began to gather around the group. The world turned quiet, save for the steady rhythm of hoofbeats on soil. Eventually, the trees parted, and before them stretched a village cradled in the arms of an enormous ravine. Lanterns lined the walkways, glowing with a soft blue light. Wooden bridges spanned rivers of mist, and houses were built into the roots of towering trees. Strange birds called from high branches, and wind chimes sang a melody unfamiliar but comforting. This was no bustling kingdom. It was humble, quiet, worn at the edges, but there was a kind of sacred stillness to it, a place that had survived too much and remembered everything. Careth Hollow, Sir Thalen said. You'll be safe here for now. The villagers gathered as the group entered. Most were elderly or injured. There were no children, no laughter. Their clothes were simple, homespun tunics, hand-patched cloaks, and their faces held a cautious hope, the kind reserved for those who have lost too much to dare believe again. When they saw the teens, murmurs spread like wind. Skyborn, they've returned. The prophecy. The teens were taken to a long, curved structure built into the trunk of a massive tree, a communal hall by the look of it. Inside, it smelled of herbs and wood smoke. Blankets were brought and warm bread. A healer gently inspected their bruises, though none of them had any serious injuries. The room felt both ancient and alive, as if the very tree they sat inside of was listening. Sir Thalen sat with them near the fire. I imagine you have many questions, he said. Too many, Alex admitted. Then I will answer what I can, the knight said, staring into the flames. This land was once whole. Proud cities, strong kings, open skies. But long ago, a beast was born or summoned, no one knows which. The Fellwyrm. It swallowed the sun above the capital, cracked the earth with its breath, broke us. Even when it was sealed beneath the mountains, its vassals, lesser monsters bound to it, began to stir. They spread chaos across Valdrian. Towns fell, people vanished, and then the sky itself began to bleed. May looked up. The rift we fell through. Thalen nodded. Yes, it has opened before once every 1,000 years. Always when the seal weakens. Always when we are at our end. And what about us? Jade asked, her voice sharper than the others. Why are we here? Because the scrolls speak of skyborn heirs, for souls not of this world, drawn by fate to bear the relics of the four winds. Only they can wield them. Only they can face the Fellwyrm's wrath. Ryan blinked. So, we're magic warriors now? Sir Thalen smiled faintly. Not yet, but you can be. Silence hung for a moment. Alex finally asked, and what if we don't want to be? What if we just want to go home? Thalen looked at him with a softness that surprised them. Then you shall be given that choice. But know this, if you do not rise, the seal will break. The beast will wake, and your world, too, may feel its hunger. The fire crackled. Outside, the mist curled tighter around the village. A distant howl echoed from the woods, low and long. The villagers lit more lanterns, and somewhere beneath the earth, the Fellwyrm stirred. Morning in Careth Hollow came slowly, as if the world itself was reluctant to wake. A low fog blanketed the treetops and hung between the wooden walkways like draped silk. The sounds of birdsong were distant and cautious, as though nature, too, feared drawing too much attention to itself. The village did not bustle, it murmured. Fires were stoked in silence. Baskets were carried with care. Every motion was small, precise, and weighed down by an invisible fear. Inside the great tree hall, the 4 teens stirred to the scent of herbal tea and the warmth of bread reheated on a hearthstone. They had slept poorly. Dreams came in flashes, visions of crumbling mountains, black wings blotting out the sun, and a pulsing red glow beneath the earth. None of them spoke about it when they woke. They didn't need to. It showed in their eyes. Alex rose first. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, staring out across the hanging bridges and the mist-shrouded village. There was a different energy in him now, quieter, more uncertain. His reckless confidence, so often a shield, had dulled overnight. He kept thinking about what Thalen said about bearing relics, about monsters with names that sounded like doomsday poems. He wasn't used to being afraid. He didn't like it. Jade sat near the embers, her knees pulled to her chest, scanning a piece of parchment one of the villagers had given her. It was a crude map of Valdrian. The place had form, structure, continents, cities, roads. Her logical mind tried to treat this like a puzzle, something that could be analyzed, maybe even controlled. But nothing made sense. The laws of physics bent strangely here. The stars were wrong. And the rift that brought them here, it felt like an invitation more than an accident. Ryan clutched a cup of tea in both hands. He wasn't talking much, which was rare. Normally he'd be the one to lighten the mood, to crack a joke or nudge the others back to normalcy. But today, he just watched the flame dance in the hearth and listened. He kept thinking about home. About his parents, his dog, the unfinished project on his desk. How far away it all felt. May had wandered out early before the others awoke. A villager had shown her the garden paths beyond the eastern ridge, winding trails lined with low-hanging crystals and glowing moths. She walked alone, her sketchbook open, drawing not from imagination, but from memory, the sky here, the trees, the beast she saw in her dreams. She didn't speak of it, but she had seen the Fellwyrm. She remembered it as though the memory belonged to someone else inside her. By midday, the villagers began to prepare a path up the ridge behind the village. Sir Thalen appeared again, flanked by 2 younger warriors, neither armored, but both carrying staffs shaped like twisted bone and wood. They looked not like soldiers, but monks. "There is someone you must meet," Thalen said. "Another knight?" Alex asked, stretching his sore legs. "No," Thalen replied. "The one who remembers everything." They followed in silence. The path wound through mossy stone steps, past ancient carvings half swallowed by the forest. Symbols etched in glowing ink pulsed faintly along the rock, curved lines that hinted at birds, stars, and flame. At the top of the ridge sat a stone temple shaped like an open eye, its roof a canopy of ivy and old glass. The air was cooler here. Still. Sacred. Inside the temple, on a throne of roots and stone, sat a woman. Old, impossibly old, yet untouched by decay. Her hair flowed silver and long, pooling around her bare feet. Her skin was pale, her lips blue as frost. But her eyes were not human. They glowed white, not with blindness, but with too much seeing. As if they were windows to countless lives. This was Ayla, the Oracle of the Hollow. When they entered, she did not greet them with a smile or words of welcome. She simply turned her gaze on them, and the weight of her attention struck like a tide. Each of them felt it, the slow unraveling of the soul beneath her stare. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't cruel. But it was total. There could be no secrets here. "You were late," she said. Her voice was soft but echoed in the temple like the memory of wind. Jade stepped forward, instinctively bristling. "Excuse me? We didn't choose to come here. We were taken." "No," Ayla corrected gently. "You were called." Ryan scratched his head. "Called by who? Some ancient beast GPS?" Ayla didn't blink. "By the world itself." Silence followed. Ayla rose slowly, her robes trailing like water. She approached each of them in turn. Her hands hovered above their chests, not touching, but sensing. When she stopped in front of May, her expression changed, almost softened. "You've seen it," she said. May nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "In my dreams." "The Fellwyrm speaks in dreams," Ayla said. "It senses you as you sense it." "Why us?" Alex asked, finally stepping forward. "Why bring kids into this? We're not warriors. We're not even close." "You are possibilities," Ayla replied. "The world is not saved by strength alone. It is saved by those who change. You are still becoming. Still unfinished. That makes you powerful in ways this realm cannot explain." She returned to her throne and lifted a stone from its center, a dull gray thing, unremarkable at first. But when she held it between her hands, it shimmered, revealing a map of glowing threads and symbols. The 14's names appeared, glowing faintly, not written, but woven into the pattern. "You must find the relics," she said. "There are 4, each attuned to a spirit, flame, sky, nature, and valor. They were lost when the seal on the Fellwyrm was first created. Only by uniting them will you forge the crown fire, the one weapon that can strike the beast's heart. And if we can't, Ryan asked, his voice small. Then the seal will break, Ayla said without hesitation. And the Fellwyrm will not stop with Valdrian. A tremor shook the temple, subtle but real. The air itself seemed to flinch. The oracle closed her eyes. It is beginning. Outside, the fog began to recede from the village, but it did not lift like morning mist. It pulled back as though retreating from something approaching. The birds stopped singing again. The wind fell still. In the distance, a roar thundered, not loud, not close, but ancient. The kind of sound that remembered fire and collapse. Ayla opened her eyes. There is no time, she whispered. The rock Leviathan has awakened. The world beneath Valdrian was older than memory, older than books, older even than the names carved into the temples of the ancients. Below the roots of the forests and deeper than the foundations of the ruined capitals, tunnels twisted like veins through the bedrock. Not carved by men, but born of something else. Something that shifted in its sleep, that listened when no one spoke, that waited. And now, at last, it stirred. In Kareth Hollow, the wind returned in a single sharp breath, carrying with it the faint scent of stone dust and something deeper, the earthy stench of things unearthed after centuries. Sir Thalen felt it first. He stood at the edge of the village's eastern bridge, staring into the treeline, his jaw tight, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade too worn to be ceremonial. The tremors will come again, he muttered, this time stronger. Inside the temple, the oracle sat once more in silence. Her eyes were closed, her hands resting on her lap, as though in prayer. But her breath had shortened, and her body trembled. Not with fear, but with urgency. She had seen this before, long ago, the same pattern, the same mistake. The 4 teens followed Thalen back down the ridge, silent. They did not know what to say to each other. Every step down the moss-covered stairs was a step deeper into something vast and unfamiliar. The sun was beginning to dim behind drifting clouds, casting pale gold across the sky. The fog no longer lingered. It withdrew, slipping between branches like smoke avoiding a fire. In the village square, the lanterns were being lit again, even though it wasn't dark. The villagers moved quietly. They had seen this before or the signs of it. Some clutched prayer stones. Others simply stared at the treeline, mouths drawn tight. Alex stood still at the center of it all, fists clenched. He hated this feeling, powerless, watching something unfold while being unable to act. It reminded him too much of those early years, moving from one military base to another, never understanding why his father left and why his mother stopped smiling. He had always tried to control what little he could, to act, to fight, but this was beyond him. I need to do something, he said under his breath. Jade heard him. You want to charge into the forest and punch the earthquake? He didn't respond, but she knew him well enough to see the answer in his eyes. Sir Thalen approached them once more, armor half-buckled, a long-bladed spear strapped to his back. The rock Leviathan will rise near the mouth of Telner, he said. That's west of here, 2 hours on foot. It burrows beneath the stone. When it surfaces, the land itself fractures. And you expect us to fight that? Ryan asked, his voice shaky. We just got here. We don't have powers or weapons. We don't even have decent shoes. You're not expected to fight, Thalen said. Only to see, to listen, to feel the truth of this world. You must witness what is coming, or nothing I say will ever feel real. So they went. A caravan was formed, just Thalen, the 4 teens, and 2 scout riders. They moved quickly through the forest trails, following old stone markers and soft rumbling beneath their feet. The woods grew darker, the air thicker. Birds no longer sang. The trees no longer swayed. The very air was holding its breath. As they moved, the ground shifted again. A low roll like thunder beneath the earth. Dust poured from treetops. Branches cracked somewhere deep in the forest. Underground, Thalen said. It's moving beneath us. Jade studied the terrain with sharp eyes. There's a pattern. It's not just random shaking. It's tracking something. May walked slower than the others, her sketchbook clutched tightly to her chest. She wasn't drawing now. She was remembering. Visions she had tried to forget. In her dreams, The rock leviathan wasn't just a creature. It was waking hunger, a thing of stone, sinew, and ancient pain. She had seen it devour entire hills in a breath. She hadn't understood it then. Now she did. They reached the mouth of Telnor at dusk. It was a great clearing surrounded by split hills, with stone pillars jutting from the ground like broken teeth. The center of the clearing was hollow, a wide, circular basin filled with gravel and cracked shale. Nothing grew here, not even moss. And then the rumbling stopped. Silence fell so heavy it pressed on the lungs. Ryan whispered, "Maybe it's gone." Then the ground exploded. From beneath the shale, the rock leviathan surged upward, a mountain with eyes, a serpent made of layered stone and pulsing amber light. Its scales clashed like grinding tectonic plates, and its breath exhaled dust storms. Its eyes, deep-set and glowing like magma, opened slowly, and in them, the teens saw not intelligence, but memory. It had crawled through ages. It had waited for them. They froze. None of them could scream. Thalen moved in front of them, spear raised, voice firm. "Do not run." The Leviathan's great maw opened, revealing rows of crystal-like teeth that hummed with inner heat. Its body unfurled, long as a castle, armored in jagged rock. Every movement tore at the earth. The trees surrounding the clearing trembled, roots ripping free. And then a sound. A deep, vibrating tone emanated from the beast. Not a roar, but a resonance. A frequency felt more in the bones than the ears. It shook the trees. It shattered nearby stones. And it awakened something inside Alex. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Inside him, a heat flared. Not pain, not fire, but a flicker of light. A pulse. A heartbeat not his own. His vision blurred, and in a flash he saw it. A circle of flame, a sword buried in ash, a hand reaching out through fire, a voice echoing not in words but in will. He gasped, and the Leviathan turned its head. It saw him. The sound stopped. The world paused. Then, with a lurch of stone and a shriek that echoed through the valley, the Leviathan dove back underground, shattering rock in its wake. Dust filled the air. The clearing collapsed in places, forming jagged canyons where the basin once lay. Silence returned. Alex remained on the ground, breath ragged, the light inside his chest fading. Thalen knelt beside him, eyes wide. "You felt it." Alex nodded, barely whispering. "It called me." "No," Thalen said. "It recognized you." May stepped forward slowly, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Something's happening to us. I think the relics are starting to wake." And somewhere, far beneath the fractured soil of Valdrian, the first relic, the core of flame, stirred in its prison of ash, waiting for its bearer to find it. They returned to Kareth Hollow under the cold light of twin moons, their journey stretched thin by silence and long shadows. No one spoke much on the trail back, not even Ryan. The encounter at the mouth of Telnor had left a hollow space in their minds, not just from the sight of the Leviathan, but from the way it had felt. The way it had looked at them. Or more precisely, him. Alex had barely said a word since. He rode near the front of the group, his hands gripping the saddle tighter than necessary, his jaw clenched. The others watched him from behind, unsure whether to ask questions or leave him be. The way the Leviathan's presence had focused on him, the way the light had glowed beneath his skin, it had changed something in him. Not just physically, emotionally. Alex, who always pushed forward without fear, now seemed burdened by something deeper. Back in the village, the hollow had grown restless. Lanterns had been replaced with larger warding fires. Chimes made of bone and silver now hung at every doorway. Children were kept indoors. The villagers whispered the word relic with a kind of cautious reverence. They had seen what rose in the west, and though the beast was gone, its presence lingered in the marrow of the earth. It would not be the last. Sir Thalen met briefly with the elders while the teens were brought food and rest. But rest did not come easily. Alex sat alone near the edge of the village bridge where the mist met the trees and the river below sang softly to itself. He stared into the darkness with a stillness that was new to him, not bored or restless, but inward, searching. The image of the Leviathan filled his thoughts. Its molten eyes. That sound, that terrible resonance, had awakened something. And when it looked into him, it had not looked with anger, but recognition. That was what unsettled him most. He remembered the pulse inside his chest. Not pain, no, it was warmth. Like the crackle of a campfire. Alive. It hadn't left entirely. Even now it pulsed faintly like a whisper behind his heartbeat. He pressed his palm to his chest, half expecting it to stop, but it didn't. It responded. Faint, but real. What are you? He whispered to himself. You felt it, didn't you? Jade's voice startled him. She approached with a cautious gaze, arms folded across her chest, but her tone lacked its usual edge. She sat beside him, her fingers fidgeting with a ring on her thumb, something she always did when her thoughts ran faster than her mouth. Alex didn't respond immediately, but finally he nodded. I don't know what it is, he said, but it was like something inside me was remembering. Like I've been carrying it this whole time and it just woke up. Jade looked at him carefully, then sighed. We need to figure this out. Fast. If one of us is connected to these relics, there's probably more waiting. And if the Fellwyrm is really waking up, we need every advantage we can get. Alex looked over at her. You believe in this now? She hesitated, then nodded. I don't want to, but I do. A voice cut softly through the night air behind them. Then come. It was Ayla, the oracle. She stood barefoot on the wooden planks, her eyes glowing faintly even in the dark. Her presence seemed to dim the night around her. Alex stood slowly, uncertain. Why? Because the first relic has chosen its bearer, she said. She turned without waiting for their response, her long robes whispering against the wood. The two teens exchanged a look, then followed. The temple of the oracle was different this time. When they stepped through the threshold, they felt it, a weight in the air, a heat that pulsed softly from the floor itself. Ayla led them to the central chamber where the stone roots curved into a low dome. At the center lay a stone pedestal, and upon it, a sphere blackened, cracked, and unremarkable. But Alex knew it instantly. That's it, he whispered. That's what I saw in my head. It is called the Core of Flame, Ayla said. The first of the 4 relics. It responds to those whose hearts burn not with rage, but conviction. The will to act even in fear. The fire to protect, not destroy. Alex took a step forward, then paused. What happens if I touch it? Ayla didn't answer. She simply inclined her head. Jade held her breath. Alex stepped forward again, closer. The air around the relic shimmered, not with heat, but energy. It was as if time slowed around it. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the sphere cracked open with a sharp hiss and light poured out. Not fire, not flame, but memory. His mind exploded with images, a battlefield of ash, swords glowing red in twilight. A boy, not unlike him, standing against a monstrous serpent. A burning crown shattered into 4 sparks. A tower collapsing beneath a crimson sky. Then the relic pulsed. Alex stumbled back, gasping, his chest glowing, and the sphere melted into him, vanishing in a swirl of ember-like light. The core of flame was no longer a separate thing. It had become part of him. Jade rushed to his side. Alex! He fell to his knees, trembling but not in pain. His eyes glowed faintly, just for a moment, then dimmed. Ayla stepped forward. It has begun. He looked up at her, voice shaking. What do I do now? You train, she said. You remember. The relics do not grant power. They unseal what already lies within. You must become what the relic believes you to be. Outside the temple, a new tremor passed beneath the village, lighter this time. Like a warning. Ryan and May arrived moments later, having been roused by the rumbling. They stared at Alex, wide-eyed, and saw the change immediately. You're glowing, Ryan whispered. Like, slightly, but glowing. May simply nodded. The first step. They stood in silence around him, 4 teenagers pulled from their world into a land on the brink of death. And now one of them carried the flame of an ancient power. Not a warrior yet, but the spark had caught. And far away in the cold spires of the broken reach, something else opened its eyes. The days that followed were heavy with change. Though the village of Kareth Hollow tried to carry on in silence and ritual, the presence of the core of flame had altered something subtle in the air, as though nature itself had begun to turn its face toward Alex. The villagers treated him differently now, bowing when he passed, whispering when he stood too long in the sunlight. He didn't like it. The weight of their belief pressed down on him harder than any monster ever could. Alex trained daily under the watchful eye of Sir Thalen. They began with movements, the old forms, blade work drawn from ancient scrolls, stances once practiced by kings and ruin wardens alike. But this wasn't just about fighting. Thalen was clear on that. This relic does not make you invincible, he said one morning as Deuce still clung to the grass. It sharpens only what already exists. If there is no discipline, it burns wild. If there is no purpose, it burns out. And yet, even as his arms grew stronger, even as sweat soaked into the dirt beneath his boots, Alex couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. It wasn't the villagers. It wasn't even Thalen. It was the relic, that soft, flickering heat beneath his chest. Like a tiny hearth always burning, reminding him that this body, this life, was no longer solely his own. Jade, meanwhile, buried herself in knowledge. The oracle had granted her access to the scrolls of word-breath ancient texts, half-preserved, written in a tangle of common speech and arcane runes. She was the only one in the group with the patience or the obsession to decipher them. Pages spoke of the 4 relics and their original bearers. Names lost to time. Faces lost to flame. One passage struck her hardest: the one who bears the sky relic shall hear it in whispers first, in dreams, in winds, in silence between thoughts. It is not a relic of strength, but of sight. The truth without illusion. At first, she dismissed it. Sky relic. Whispers. Poetry. But the dreams began. They were never complete, just fragments. A tower crumbling under stars. A throne of cloud and feathers. A woman's voice saying, "You already know the answer." She would wake gasping, clutching her sheets, with that strange feeling humming in her ears, like the end of a question you couldn't quite hear. May noticed. Of course she did. They shared a room in the upper hall of the healer's home, and May always woke at the same time, quietly watching from her corner. She never asked. She simply drew. One night, as Jade sat at the edge of her bed, rubbing her eyes, May gently passed her a page. It was a sketch of Jade standing on a floating stone, her eyes glowing white, clouds spiraling around her hands. "You've seen it too," Jade murmured. "I've always seen it," May said softly. "You just had to catch up." Ryan tried to keep things light. He scavenged jokes from the dusty ruins of their shared lives, from school, from movies, from memories that now felt like a different world entirely. But he too was changing. He watched his friends, one by one, shift into something bigger, older, stranger. And though he smiled, something cold twisted in his stomach. What if he wasn't chosen? What if he was the extra in someone else's prophecy? He never said it out loud. And so the days passed and the land shifted again. Ashmere, the volcanic spine of the western ridge, had always been silent. The villagers called it the sleeping crown. But now smoke was rising, black plumes curling into the sky, staining the clouds. And from within the molten valley, a sound began to spread, a deep, rolling groan like the ocean dragged through a tunnel. The oracle called it by name. Vorthrax, the second vassal of the Fellwyrm, the lava kraken. Sir Thalen summoned the teens to the central hall. He laid a map upon the stone table, one drawn centuries ago, before the magma had carved new rivers through the mountain passes. Vorthrax feeds on heat and fear, Thalen explained. It sleeps in the caldera of Ashmere. But something is rousing it. Something beneath. If it rises, it will spill fire into the basin. Kareth Hollow is within range. And you want us to stop it? Alex asked, surprised. No, Thalen said. I want you to see it. Just as you did with the Leviathan. The relics respond strongest in the presence of chaos. If the sky relic is calling to Jade, it will awaken there. Jade frowned. What if it doesn't? Then we run. The next morning, they left. The journey westward was harder than their trek to Telner. The land here was raw, broken by ancient eruptions, blackened stone cutting through the hills like scars. Pools of sulfur bubbled beside steam vents. Trees stood like skeletal remains, branches charred, leaves long since turned to ash. It was beautiful in a way. Terrible and strangely honest. They reached the edge of the caldera at dusk. The volcano's mouth yawned open before them, a wide basin filled with shifting rock and rivers of red-hot magma. And rising from the center was a structure half buried in fire, a crumbling forge temple of the old world. Its spires glowed orange and something moved beneath the molten surface. Slow, rhythmic, breathing. They waited in silence. Jade stood apart from the others, staring down into the heart of the volcano. Her ears rang. Her pulse quickened. And then she heard it, not a voice exactly, but a presence. Above. Always above. Do not blink. She gasped. At that moment, the magma churned. With an explosion of fire and stone, Vorthrax rose. It was a creature of molten tentacles and obsidian armor, its body shaped like a coiled dragon twisted with the anatomy of a deep-sea leviathan. Lava flowed from its open jaws like saliva. Its eyes burned not yellow, but blue, like fire seen through tears. The mountain shook. The very sky warped with heat. And above it all, suspended in the ash cloud, hovered a shard of light, small, flickering, like a falling star that refused to land. Jade felt it burn into her mind. Come and see. The sky relic. Heat rolled like waves across the caldera. The air was so thick with ash and sulfur that it painted everything in flickering orange and gray. The eruption had split the valley in two, pouring lava through old stone paths and down the shattered ridges. Wind howled above the rim like a dying breath, but in the center of it all stood the forge temple, half submerged in fire, and the monster that slumbered no more. Vorthrax had fully awakened. It coiled around the forge like a crown of flame and stone. Its body moved with the rhythm of tides, slow, mighty, deliberate. Steam hissed where its tentacles dragged across molten rivers. Each blink of its glowing blue eyes sent ripples through the air, a gaze so ancient it seemed to peel away time itself. And above it, suspended in a halo of ash and glowing wind, hung a shard of light. Jade couldn't take her eyes off it. The sky relic. It wasn't a stone or a weapon. It looked like a crystallized tear made of light and air. Floating. Waiting. Whispering in silence that hummed directly into her bones. Her ears rang not from the eruption, but from that quiet voice she alone could hear. Above. Rise. Become. Jade. Ryan's voice came from behind her. We have to move. That thing's going to, but Jade stepped forward. Not fast. Not with fear, but with certainty. She walked to the edge of the cliff where the ground broke off into steaming abyss. The wind circled around her, tugging at her cloak and hair, lifting strands like unseen fingers. Her heart beat slower, not faster. She knew what was happening. The relic didn't speak in language, it spoke in truth. And that truth was rising. May reached for her arm. Jade, don't, but it was already too late. The wind caught her. With a sudden pull, like the snap of a rope, Jade lifted from the stone, not violently, not unnaturally, but as if the world had remembered gravity wasn't a rule, just a suggestion. The wind carried her upward, circling the relic like a current around a leaf. Her eyes glowed pale blue. Her breath slowed. Her mind opened. Below her, Vorthrax turned its head. It saw her. It knew her. And instead of roaring, it bowed. In the air above the caldera, the wind formed a vortex, a spinning column of mist and dust. Jade floated at the center, unmoving, eyes wide and glowing. Time fell away. There was no volcano. No monster. No world. Only memory. She stood, or thought she did, in a sky made of mirrors. Stars above. Cities below. Clouds shaped like faces, crying forgotten names. A woman stood before her, barefoot on air, wearing robes of pale silk and a crown of light. Her eyes were endless. Her voice was silent, and still Jade heard every word. You are the seer, the woman said. The second to awaken. The bearer of the wind's truth. Jade struggled to speak. What do I have to do? You must see. And suddenly vision exploded through her, a black tower rising from a shattered desert. A crown split into 4 burning pieces. A young boy falling through snow with blood on his hands. A mirror breaking as someone screamed her name. The Fellwyrm uncoiling beneath a city of gold. Then silence again. The woman placed her hand on Jade's brow and the relic descended from the sky, not falling, but folding into her, becoming light within her chest, a spark of wind caught in a storm. The sky relic had chosen. On the cliffs, the others could barely see her. Ryan shielded his eyes. She's glowing. Is that normal? No, Thalen muttered. It is right. The wind suddenly burst outward, a ring of force that knocked loose stones from the cliff and sent hot ash sailing away. Then Jade descended slowly, her body carried like a feather, and touched down on the edge of the cliff. Her eyes were clear, her breath calm, but her gaze was not the same. Jade? Alex asked. She blinked once, then smiled faintly. I see it now, she said. What? Ryan asked. See what? Jade turned toward the volcano. Vorthrax isn't going to attack, she said. Not yet. It's not awake out of rage. It's awake because something below the mountain is calling all of them. Not just the vassals. Even the Fellwyrm. May stepped forward. The seal, it's not breaking on its own, Jade said quietly. It's being undone. Someone is pulling the threads loose. Intentionally. Thalen looked out across the burning caldera, his jaw tight. Then this is no longer about monsters stirring, he said. It's war. They turned to leave, retreating into the narrow stone paths before the heat became too much. Behind them, Vorthrax coiled once more around the forge ruins and sank beneath the lava without a sound, not defeated, not enraged, simply watching. Back in Kareth Hollow, the Oracle lit 4 candles. Only 2 had flame. 2 of 4 have awakened, she whispered. But the wind brings warning. The crown is stirring. She looked to the west, where the smoke from Ashmere rose like a black tongue into the sky. Far beyond, in the ruins of the fallen kingdom of Ironhall, a figure in a cloak of shadows stood atop a ruined spire, staring into a mirror of black glass. In the reflection, Jade's glowing face stared back at him. He smiled. Far beyond the smoldering skies of Ashmere, beyond the forests of Carith Hollow and the quiet rivers that wound like silver veins through the land of Valdrian, there stood the ruins of a once great city, Ironhall. Once a jewel of the Central Kingdoms, it had fallen centuries ago in a war that history had almost chosen to forget. Now, its towers leaned broken against the wind, its halls overgrown with creeping vines and swallowed by dust. The earth itself had begun to reclaim it, as if the world wished to erase the memory of what happened there, but not everyone had forgotten. Atop the tallest spire, fractured, blackened, and twisted with time, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. Not by magic, but by something older. Something colder. His cloak moved even without wind, edges frayed with darkness. His face was obscured beneath a black iron mask, polished like obsidian. No eye holes, no mouth, only a smooth reflection like a mirror too deep to see through. Before him floated a shard of blackened glass, an artifact not born of Valdrian, but stolen from the world's sleeping veins. A thing not forged, but harvested. I in the glass, an image flickered, jade, glowing with the power of the sky relic. Her eyes bright with the clarity of foresight. Her stance firm, the masked figure tilted his head, observing her like one would a puzzle piece fitting too perfectly. So, he said softly, voice layered like gravel and smoke. Another bearer awakens. He reached out and the glass rippled. The image of jade blurred and was replaced by a swirling map of Valdrian, etched in crimson light. Small fires flickered in several places, the Leviathan's path, the volcanic rise of Vorthrax, the light in Carith Hollow. The voice behind the mask whispered to the wind, but the world itself seemed to listen. Let them gather their relics, he said. They will come to me when they are whole, as the prophecy demands. His hand gripped a staff, not of wood, but of fused bone and forgotten metal. A crown-shaped symbol pulsed at its tip, broken in 4 places. I broke the crown once, he muttered. I'll do it again. But this time I will wear what remains. Then he turned and the glass dissolved. His name was not spoken in stories. Not anymore. But long ago, before the Fellwyrm's first sealing, he had another name. A name that once stood beside kings and saviors. But that name had burned away with time. Now he was only known as the Crownbreaker. Back in Carith Hollow, the wind had calmed and the skies had dimmed to pale morning light. The village, though wary, had begun to breathe again. But the 4 outsiders were already preparing to leave point. 2 relics had awakened. 2 remained. Alex stood near the armory with Thalen, fitting a bracer over his right forearm. The core of flames still burned quietly in his chest, not loud or dramatic, but always present. It was part of him now, and with each passing day, he could feel it growing more responsive, not just to danger, but to thought. When his focus sharpened, so did its heat. When his mind wandered, the flame dulled. It needed him to be clear. Ironhall, Thalen said, handing him a curved short blade, was once a city of stone and spirit. They carved their homes into the cliffs and pulled metal from the mountains without ever breaking the ground. They were proud, secretive. When they fell, they took many truths with them. And now we're heading there? Alex asked, strapping the blade to his side. Thalen nodded. It's the most likely place the Earth relic was sealed. The people of Ironhall revered it as the Heart-True. It may still rest beneath the broken vaults. Ryan joined them, slinging his satchel over one shoulder. Let me guess, more giant monsters guarding it? Jade, walking up behind him, answered. That's the pattern. Ryan sighed. Awesome. May followed in silence, her hands cradling her sketchbook. She had drawn Vorthrax the night before, in perfect detail, without having seen it directly. The creature's outline, its inner heat, even its eyes. The oracle said her gift was not mere art, it was resonance. She remembered things that hadn't happened yet. She remembered futures. As the group gathered, the oracle approached. You must leave before dusk, she said. Ironhall sleeps, but not peacefully. The echoes of its fall still linger. Echoes? Alex asked. She turned to him. Not all monsters wear flesh. Some are made of memory. Some are made of guilt. Alex glanced at the others, his brow furrowed. Great. Haunted ruins. This keeps getting better. The oracle looked at each of them in turn. Her eyes lingered on Ryan. You will not all leave Ironhall unchanged, she said. One of you will find more than you seek. Ryan blinked. What does that mean? But she did not answer. They set out by midday, riding along the cliffs that bordered the Greenwash Basin. The road to Ironhall was broken, not by war, but by time. Ancient bridges cracked under their weight. Old statues stared blankly from moss-covered alcoves. And all along the way, birds flew in strange patterns, avoiding the spires ahead. By dusk, the ruins of Ironhall appeared on the horizon, towering bones of a fallen city silhouetted against a dying sun, and something watched them from within. Something that remembered when the crown first shattered, something that had waited for centuries beneath the earth. The ruins of Iron Hall rose before them like the ribs of a long-dead giant, fractured towers clawing at the clouds. Moss spilled from the mouths of broken statues. Balconies hung like teeth from shattered spires. The road that once led through the city gates had collapsed into a chasm, forcing the group to climb across twisted beams and overgrown stones. Even the wind here felt tired, dragging itself slowly between the alleys as if mourning a city that had never truly died. Alex stepped carefully over a stone engraved with faded runes, each symbol half-eaten by lichen. His fingers brushed the surface as he passed. The core of flame pulsed faintly in his chest, not in warning, but in recognition. As though it remembered this place. Iron Hall had not fallen to fire. It had been emptied. "We shouldn't be here after sundown," Sir Thalen muttered. He moved cautiously, his spear drawn, his gaze flicking up toward the taller buildings. "This place is hollow in a way no place should be. As if something chewed out the soul." "That's a lovely image," Ryan muttered, stepping over a cracked archway. "So comforting." Jade was quiet. Her eyes scanned everything, the worn murals, the broken arches, the trees that grew where houses had once stood. She saw patterns others didn't. Shapes in the cracks. Movement in the stillness. "There's something here," she said softly. "It's not watching us. It's remembering us. As if we've been here before." "Maybe we have," May said, almost in a whisper. "Not in body, but in something else." May hadn't spoken much since they passed the outer gates. She walked with her head down, sketchbook clutched tight, fingers shaking. Not with fear, but with recognition. She'd drawn this city once before, in a dream she didn't understand. Before they ever came to this world. Before the portal. Before the monsters. She'd drawn the streets perfectly. They moved deeper into the city, passing through a market plaza where trees now grew through rooftops. Birds circled high above, never daring to land. On one wall, an old carving caught Alex's attention, 4 warriors standing around a broken crown, their hands raised toward the sky. A 5th figure stood apart from them, face covered by a smooth mask. "That's him," Jade said. "The one I saw in the vision. The Crownbreaker." Ryan frowned. "Why is he on the wall of the city he supposedly destroyed?" Thalen stepped closer, examining the mural. "Because once, long ago, he saved it." The others turned toward him in surprise. "Before he became what he is now," Thalen continued, "he was a guardian. A sealer of the crown. One of the 5 who defeated the Fellwyrm and locked it beneath the earth." Alex narrowed his eyes. "What happened to him?" "No one knows," Thalen said. "Some say power corrupted him. Others say the crown spoke to him in dreams. Whispered truths the others refused to hear. In the end, he shattered his portion of the crown and vanished. The others thought him dead, but the seal has been weakening ever since." They stood in silence, the wind stirring the dust around their feet. Then the ground shifted. It began as a subtle tremble beneath their boots, then grew into a deep, breathing rumble that rolled through the stone. May's eyes went wide. "It's waking." The street beneath them cracked open. A section of road collapsed, sending a plume of dust into the air. Ryan stumbled backward as a shape rose from the pit, not a beast of flesh, but a construct of stone and ancient bone, molded in the likeness of a warrior. It had no face, no eyes, only the faint glow of green light pulsing from within its chest. "Move!" Thalen shouted, hurling his spear as the Echo Guard lunged forward. The weapon struck true, embedding in the creature's shoulder, but it didn't flinch. It raised a massive blade, its edges jagged like broken glass, and brought it down with a roar that wasn't sound but memory. The impact shattered part of the courtyard. Alex stepped forward, instinct burning through his chest. The core of flame surged. He called to it. For a split second, time slowed, and in his hand, a sword ignited. Not of steel, but of flame-given form. The hilt was ancient. The blade shimmered with embers. Not heatless, but not burning him either. He swung. The Echo Guard reeled as the blade struck its chest, scorching a line through stone. It staggered, then collapsed with a sound like a mountain exhaling. The group stared at Alex, breath caught. "I didn't think," he said, panting. "It just happened." "The relic is responding," Jade said. "It's learning from you." But May wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the pit where the construct had risen and the stairs that now led down into darkness. "There's more," she whispered. The oracle had said the earth relic, the heartroot, would be found beneath, in the vaults of stone. And now the way was open. Thalen retrieved his spear, his jaw set. "We go now before more of them rise." One by one, they descended into the stone. The lower city was colder, older. The walls were carved with runes none of them could read, pulsing faintly as if remembering footsteps that hadn't echoed in centuries. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of moss and dust and the weight of time. And then they reached it. A circular chamber sealed by a door of black stone. In its center was a sigil, 4 lines intersecting at a spiral. The symbol of the crown. Jade stepped forward, brushing her fingers over the markings. Ryan spoke up. "Should we knock?" The door answered him with a deep, echoing groan and slowly slid open. Inside was a single pillar and atop it a stone heart the size of a skull. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat slowed by centuries. Roots stretched from its base into the stone floor, still alive. May stepped forward, eyes wide. "It's beautiful." But the room darkened. From the far wall, something moved. Not a creature, but a shadow given form. A memory made of smoke and shape. It stood tall, draped in the robes of a king, its face hidden beneath a smooth, iron mask. The Crownbreaker. He did not speak, but they heard him. Another relic claimed. Another stepped toward the end. Ryan stepped back. How's he here?" "He's not," Jade said. "This is an echo." A memory burned into the vault. The Crownbreaker turned toward the Heartroot. "You may take it," the voice echoed in their minds. "But know this, for each relic awakened, a seal breaks. And when the last breath of the crown is stirred, nothing will stop what lies beneath." The shadow vanished. Alex stepped forward, placing a hand on the relic. And the earth relic, the Heartroot, answered. Roots surged into his palm. Not painful, but binding. The warmth of life, not flame, not wind, but growth. Strength. Endurance. Patience. And in that moment, a memory filled him, a king in green armor. A forest burned to ash. A choice made too late. He gasped. Then the roots retreated. The relic had passed. 3 of 4. And far above, in the spire ruins, the true Crownbreaker opened his eyes, the mirror in his hands now pulsing. "They gather quickly," he whispered. "Good. Let them come." The rain fell in slow sheets, gentle and ceaseless, as though the world itself was remembering how to mourn. Valemore was not a city in the way Ironhall had been. It had no grand towers or walls. No marketplaces. No roads. It was a drowned place, a ghost of civilization lost beneath the waters of the northern swamplands, swallowed over centuries by mire and fog and the quiet rot of time. What remained were half-submerged ruins, old stone ribs jutting from green-black pools, and broken statues lying face down in the muck, their features smoothed away by endless rain. To reach Valemore, the group had traveled for days through the Mistmarsh path, a route so twisted with vines and slow-flowing sludge that time seemed to stretch. No birds sang here. No beasts hunted. Only frogs croaked from beneath the water skin, and strange lights moved in the fog, never close, never far, always just watching. The oracle's words echoed in their minds as they moved deeper into the heart of the wetlands. The 4th relic lies beneath the water. Hidden where the sky forgets itself and mirrors lie broken. Only the heart untouched by desire can bear the burden of the depth. None of them had known what that meant, but Ryan had begun to feel it. He didn't speak of it. Not at first. He told himself it was just nerves. That the dreams, dark corridors, water rising, a reflection that didn't mimic him, were nothing but stress. But now, waist-deep in Valemore's dark water, torchlight flickering against the ruins around them, he knew better. He could hear it now. Not a voice. A hum. Low, deep, like a heartbeat inside the mud. May walked beside him, quiet as always, her sketchbook tucked beneath her cloak to stay dry. She glanced at him once, not with alarm, but with knowing. As though she'd already drawn what was about to happen. Alex led the group ahead, his flame blade sheathed but present, the core of flame simmering beneath his skin. Every now and then, the water hissed gently where it brushed against him, as if steam recognized steam. Jade followed behind, her eyes clouded, the sky relic sharpening her senses until the weight of too much truth pressed behind her eyes. She didn't just see the ruins, she remembered them, though she had never stepped here before. She saw people standing where moss now grew. Heard laughter beneath the groaning fog. This place had been alive. Once. Thalen was silent, spear in hand, eyes scanning the gloom for signs of movement. But the greatest danger here wasn't the monsters, not yet. It was what lay beneath. And it was calling Ryan. He stopped walking. The others turned. "Something's here," he said softly. "What do you mean?" Alex asked, moving toward him. Ryan looked down into the water. "I saw it in a dream. A city beneath the mud. With a mirror at the center. I thought it was just," he didn't finish. He was already moving. He stepped deeper until the water reached his chest. Then he ducked under. Below the surface, the world changed. Valemore's true body lay beneath the mud, columns of stone tangled in roots, shattered walkways, and bones long consumed by silt. Fish fled as Ryan passed, though no light touched him. His breath was calm. He did not panic. He let the relic guide him. And there it was, a mirror 10 feet across, lying flat beneath the water. Not glass, but polished obsidian, flawless even under centuries of pressure. It shimmered faintly. It watched. Ryan reached out, hand trembling. When he touched it, the world vanished. He was standing in himself. A memory. A reflection. He saw the school hallway. Saw lockers, saw his friends. Saw his own face staring back at him, same eyes, same smirk, but something off. The reflection blinked a half-second too late. It stepped toward him. Ryan backed away, but the reflection mirrored him, then stepped free from the mirror. Now it stood before him, solid. Real. What are you? Ryan asked. The reflection smiled. I'm the part of you that doesn't pretend. Pretend what? That you're not afraid, it said, stepping closer. That you're not the least of them. That you haven't watched them all shine, one by one, while you stand in the background. No sword. No visions. No roots. Ryan clenched his fists. Why are you saying this? Because the depth doesn't give power. It reveals truth. And only those who accept that truth can hold what lies below. The reflection reached out and pressed a hand to Ryan's chest. And Ryan understood. All his doubts. His fears. His quiet envy. It was normal. It didn't make him weak. It made him real. The relic wasn't waiting for perfection. It was waiting for honesty. He took a deep breath and stepped forward through his reflection. The others saw the water glow. A pulse of deep sapphire light bloomed outward from Ryan's body, casting ripples that shook the ruins. Then, from beneath, he rose slowly, arms out, eyes glowing faintly with silver light. In his hands, something floated upward from the water, a small, stone mask, cracked and weathered. The relic of depth. It hovered before him, then melted into his chest like smoke. Ryan gasped. He fell to his knees on the stone walkway, coughing, soaked, shaking. Are you okay? Jade knelt beside him. He nodded. Yeah, I just saw too much. Thalen looked up toward the fog. The seal will feel this. And it did. From deep beneath the ruins, something moved. A long, slow slither of mud and bone. The ground shook. Bubbles rose. And then a shape tore free from the depths. Not a serpent. Not a kraken. A Wyrm. A creature of drowned scales and ribbed armor, blind eyes glowing faintly. Its mouth open not with teeth, but with layered tendrils like kelp. Its body was as long as a village. It emerged from the swamp like the return of a legend, the final vassal of the Fellwyrm, Mirathan, the drowned prophet. It didn't roar. It spoke, not in words, but in pulses of pressure, felt in bone, heard in memory. For relics. For hearts. The crown stirs. The chain breaks. And then it sank back beneath the water, leaving only silence. The group stared after it, hearts pounding. Alex looked at Ryan. You okay? Ryan stood slowly, his breathing steady. For the first time, there was no sarcasm in his eyes. I think I finally know who I am, he said. And far away, in the tower of broken stone, the crownbreaker stood in silence. All 4 relics had awakened. The end had begun. The sky above Kareth Hollow was no longer calm. Storm clouds brewed in heavy spirals, thick and unnatural, coiling around the mountaintops like smoke from a divine forge. There was no thunder, no lightning, only a relentless, bone-deep hum in the wind that blanketed the village in stillness. When the group returned, soaked, exhausted, changed, the townsfolk did not greet them with cheers or offerings, but silence. They watched from doorways, from behind drawn curtains, eyes wide with quiet fear. For word had already reached them through the wind and stone, through the tremble of earth and sudden chill in the river. The bearers had returned and the crown was nearly whole. Alex, now bound to the core of flame, carried himself with a new stillness. The hot spark that once flickered wild within him had tempered into something tighter, heavier. There was discipline now in every step, every glance, a contained fire behind his gaze that smoldered but no longer begged to burn. The relic had fused with him in more ways than just the physical. It had begun reshaping how he thought. Each movement calculated, each word restrained. His shoulders bore the weight of more than armor or prophecy. He was the blade now, and the blade had purpose. Jade, walking silently beside him, seemed changed too, but not in body. The sky relic had sharpened her, carved away the hesitation, the doubt. Her eyes rarely blinked. She moved as if already seeing a few moments into the future, reacting to things before they happened. She spoke little, not out of pride, but because silence revealed more. Conversations were no longer exchanges to her, but puzzles, emotional patterns laid bare. And yet with each passing hour, the whisper in her mind grew louder. The relic never slept, and in the quiet hours of night, neither did she. May followed just behind, her steps light as falling leaves. Of them all, she alone had remained quietest through the transformation, not withdrawn, but inward. The earth relic had given her more than just strength, it had given her memory. Not just of places or people, but of roots buried deep beneath the waking world. Every step she took was weighted by echoes, footsteps layered upon hers, ancient guardians, dead kings, forgotten children, and she remembered them all. Her sketches had changed too. Now, when she drew, the pencil moved faster than her thought, guided by a hand not fully her own. Entire structures poured from her fingers, symbols she didn't understand flowing like instinct. She spoke only when necessary. And when she did, the room often listened more than it understood. But it was Ryan who bore the deepest change. The boy who had once filled every silence with laughter or deflection had gone still. The relic of depth had stripped him bare in ways no weapon ever could, peeling away the layers of humor and uncertainty to reveal something hard and raw beneath honesty. Not only with others, but with himself. He carried no weapon, no armor. He didn't need to. The power inside him was not meant to strike or shield, but to uncover. He saw through masks now, through lies. And perhaps most of all, he finally saw himself clearly, not as a shadow beside stronger friends, but as the one who walked ahead when all paths disappeared. His silence now was not emptiness, but intention. The oracle waited for them in the old stone hall at the village's heart. Her face was lined more deeply than before, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. She had not slept. The moment the last relic had awakened, the wind had turned against her. The threads of fate she once read with clarity now pulled in too many directions at once. She stood before a table marked with runes and old iron chains, the fragments of the ancient crown laid out like jagged teeth, 3 false, 1 true, and behind her, for candles burned unnaturally bright. 1 for each bearer, 1 for each burden. She did not welcome them. She simply began to speak. The crown was once whole, not a relic, but a soul. A living artifact forged from the breath of the world itself, created not to grant power, but to bind it. When the Fellwyrm rose in the first sundering, devouring light and time and memory itself, the crown was broken and reforged into 4 pieces, each one entrusted to a sealer. Those sealers were never meant to live. To hold such relics meant to give oneself wholly to their will, to become less human, more echo. The old sealers knew this. They died for it, but the crown remained sealed, until the crownbreaker shattered his peace. It was not betrayal, the oracle whispered, but grief. He had seen something in the depths, something the others refused to believe, and in trying to stop it, he fractured the balance. Ever since the seal had weakened, the Fellwyrm stirred, and now with the gathering of all 4 relics once more, the crown was ready to reform, but only through sacrifice. To reforge the crown, the 4 relics must be returned to the place of sealing, the throne of ash buried deep within the veil of cinders. There, in the heart of the broken world, the bearers must stand as one. The relics would burn away the physical, stripping flesh from soul, form from memory, and merge once more. One of them would survive. The others would become the crown. Silence followed her words, long and cold. There was no outcry, no anger, just the understanding that the end of the journey now had a price. That from the beginning, this had never been about saving the world, but weighing its worth. Night came quickly that day. Each of them slept alone, or tried to. The dreams returned now with more force, clearer than before. Visions of ash storms, of beasts with too many eyes, of a city made of bones spiraling into the sky, of the crownbreaker watching from a throne not built but grown, a living seat that pulsed with memory. Alex dreamed of fire swallowing a village and of himself standing in its center, untouched. Jay dreamed of mirrors breaking in silence, her reflection blinking just out of sync. May dreamed of a forest of statues, each one bearing her face, their mouths open in silent screams. Ryan dreamed of drowning again. But this time, he didn't fight it. And high above the village, upon a ridge where no one dared to stand, the crownbreaker watched. He held no blade, no army, only the broken half of the crown, the piece he had kept hidden all these years. It pulsed now slowly, like a wound finally reopening. The bearers were ready. The gate would open. And when they arrived, he would speak the final truth no one wished to hear. They left Careth Hollow without farewell. There were no words left that could prepare the villagers, nor comfort that could ease the tension that now hung between the bearers like smoke between trees. Their path led eastward into lands no longer drawn on maps, a desolation too old to be charted, too cursed to be named. The Vale of Cinders. Once a kingdom, once a garden of towers and rivers, now a blackened scar on the world's spine. A place where time itself had recoiled. The battleground of the first sundering. The place where the Fellwyrm fell, or was sealed. The place where the crown would either be mended or shattered forever. The journey was slow, not because of distance, but because of the weight. Each step forward dragged more than just boots through ash and soot. The closer they came, the heavier the relics grew. Not in mass, but in presence. Alex could feel the core of flame in his chest thrumming like a second heartbeat, hotter with every hour. Even breathing felt different now, as though the air was learning to resist him. His thoughts were sharp, but they sliced inward, burning away memories of who he had once been. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the battlefield, not the one ahead, but the one within, where he had once fought his own weakness. And now he wasn't sure he had one. He had only transformed. Jade walked with her head down and her eyes half open, half blinded by the visions that came too easily now. She no longer needed to concentrate. The sky relic offered glimpses without invitation. She saw people they passed before they met them, saw cracks in the ground before they formed, saw herself standing atop a spire of bone in the days to come, holding something she didn't understand, crying without sound. The visions layered over the real world like a second skin. She saw the others through that veil now, saw the way their fates curled and split, and it terrified her to know there were so few paths left. May said nothing for 3 days. Her footsteps barely disturbed the ash beneath them. Where the others trudged, she seemed to drift, the earth relic rooting her to the land even as it pulled her further from the world. She no longer sketched, her hands shook too much. She simply stared at the horizon, lips pressed thin, eyes glazed not with fear but with burden. There were songs in the stones now. She heard them in the crunch beneath her soles, in the cracks that opened in dead trees, in the way birds no longer cried overhead. The land spoke to her not in words, but in elegies. And Ryan, once the soul of every conversation, had fallen silent. Not out of sorrow, but clarity. The relic of depth had stripped him down, exposed all that was hollow, and filled it with a truth he could no longer escape. He felt the crown now, not as an object, but as a presence, a missing puzzle piece searching for its whole. He heard whispers in the wind that carried no malice, only inevitability. There were moments, brief and chilling, where he looked at his friends and wondered if they could all truly walk into that final chamber and come back. Or if one of them already knew they wouldn't. The landscape had changed. No longer were there trees or rivers or even clouds, only jagged stone and scorched earth. The sky turned copper during the day, iron at dusk, and at night it pulsed faintly as if remembering a fire that had never stopped burning. The veil itself stretched before them like a great wound, miles wide, rimmed with fractured pillars of bone and fossilized flame. The wind here did not howl. It hissed, as if warning, as if begging them to turn back. They crossed a ridge and saw it for the first time. The throne of ash. Not a throne in the mortal sense. Not carved or built. It was a formation grown from the scorched bones of the earth, a towering arc of jagged spires encircling a crater whose depths could not be seen. Blackened relics of war stood half-buried in the ground, broken swords as long as ships, shattered helms as wide as doors, shields melted to slag. The ruins of the final stand. And at the center of it all, surrounded by rising heat and the scent of iron and soot, pulsed the ancient forge where the crown had once been born, a hollow, smoking ring of obsidian untouched by time. The crownbreaker waited. Not visible, not near, but present. His essence seeped from every crack in the stone. His memory lingered in the swirling ash. His voice whispered through the heat, though no mouth spoke. Come, bearers. Come and see what truth has cost you. The group made camp 100 feet from the crater's rim. No fire was needed, the ground itself exhaled warmth. But none of them slept. They sat in silence, listening to the wind shape itself into echoes. Listening to the veil remember. Alex watched the forge from a distance. It glowed faintly, like an eye trying to open. The sword he had carried, once blazing, now shimmered with strange veins of light, the core reacting to its place of origin. His thoughts were not of victory or valor. They were of home, of a living room with soft lights, of a family who thought he'd just vanished, of the simple pain of leaving things unfinished. He didn't fear dying. He feared being forgotten. Jade lay flat, staring at the sky. The stars didn't blink here. They just watched. She tried to follow the threads, tried to see the outcomes, but the paths now twisted too tightly, tangled by choices not yet made. For the first time, the sky relic gave her nothing. Not because there was no future, but because there were too many. May sat with her eyes closed, hands pressed into the ash. She wasn't praying. She was listening. Beneath the surface, things moved. The bones of old titans shifted. The roots of dead forests creaked. She knew now that the land itself remembered the pain of the ceiling. It ached. And it would ache again. Ryan stood at the edge of the crater. The obsidian ring shimmered below him. He felt it like a magnet in his chest, tugging. The depth had no voice here, only pressure. He knew what was coming. Not the battle. Not the sacrifice. But the choice. Someone would have to make it. And far below, deeper than even the throne of ash dared descend, something vast opened its eyes. The Fellwyrm stirred. It did not rise. It did not roar. It remembered, and the earth trembled in response. At dawn, there was no sunrise. The sky did not brighten, the clouds did not shift, and the wind did not move. Instead, a dull, amber haze pressed down from above, thick and unmoving, casting the veil of cinders in a glow that felt like the inside of a dying flame. The air was dry, acrid, a scent like burnt bone and rusted blood. Nothing stirred beyond the circle of scorched black earth they had camped upon, and nothing dared make a sound. It was as though the very breath of the land had paused, watching. The group stood at the edge of the crater, looking down into the heart of the ancient scar where the final piece of the crown would be reforged or lost forever. The obsidian ring glowed now, brighter than before, its center pulsing with a dark radiance. There were no stairs, no path, only a narrow descent of jagged stone that spiraled into the pit like the ribs of a dying beast. They descended without speaking. The relics in their bodies, flame, sky, earth, and depth, pulsed in quiet rhythm, syncing with one another in ways none of them understood. The further they walked, the more the air seemed to push against them. Each step grew heavier, each breath more labored. The crater was not deep in distance, but it was steeped in something older than depth, a kind of pressure that lived beneath understanding. The walls of the crater were carved with glyphs, some fractured, others burned smooth. They pulsed faintly as though sensing the return of something long lost. Here, where the seal had once been forged, time had folded in upon itself. Memories lay layered like stone, compressed by centuries of silence and waiting. The silence was not absence, but a holding, a breath never released. When they reached the bottom, they found the forge. It was not a forge in any traditional sense. There was no anvil, no flame, no hammer. Only a ring of black metal embedded in the stone, etched with runes so old they bled light. In its center was a hollow the size of a heart, but shaped like no living organ. It pulsed slowly, like something remembering how to be. Around it lay 4 channels, narrow grooves that branched outward in perfect symmetry, veins in stone waiting to drink. Each channel pointed toward one of them. Alex stepped forward first and without instruction placed his hand on the groove nearest him. The core of flame in his chest responded instantly, sending a flicker of molten light through the stone. His body trembled, not from pain, but from the sheer memory that surged through him. He saw a battlefield. He saw giants made of smoke and ash. He saw a king's final breath sealing away the fire that could not be killed. He pulled back, gasping, and the glow remained. Jade followed. She reached her hand forward and touched the sky's path. The moment her skin met the stone, she was no longer standing there. She was above it in the storm. She felt wings of cloud and thunder. She saw the first sealer of wind standing atop a mountain as lightning wept from the sky and carved the path of prophecy. Her own breath caught. Her heart raced, but her hands stayed still. When she pulled back, the groove pulsed with silver light. May's turn came next. Her fingers touched the 3rd groove, and the earth welcomed her like a long-lost daughter. Roots burst beneath the surface. She saw trees that had grown 1,000 years in a blink. She saw the fall of Ironhall and the last guardian kneeling in the dirt, burying the relic in the soil as the city crumbled around him. She felt his sorrow, his resolve. She whispered a silent thanks to him as she stepped back, leaving the groove bathed in green-gold light. Ryan was last. He hesitated only a moment, then reached forward, letting his hand settle into the final path. The depth did not surge. It sank. It dragged him downward, not his body, but his awareness. He saw the bottom of every memory, the weight of every regret. He saw the truth the crownbreaker had seen, the same truth that had fractured him. He saw the future if the crown remained broken, and the future if it was made whole again. He did not understand it all, but he accepted it. When he stepped back, the forge pulsed once, then fell silent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the earth shifted. It was not a quake, not a tremor. It was deeper than that. A settling, the way a mountain might sigh if it had waited too long. From the walls of the crater, ash fell like rain. The obsidian ring flared with light, red, silver, green, and blue, and the hollow at its center began to fill. Not with liquid, but with light given shape. It rose slowly, carving itself into the shape of the crown, a circlet of broken fragments, fused not with solder or spell, but with sacrifice. The moment it took form, the wind died. The crown pulsed once, twice, and the world screamed. From deep below, from beneath the pit itself, far under the crust of scorched rock and fossilized war, came a sound no living creature should ever hear. It was not roar nor cry, but memory breaking free from silence. The seal was no longer weakening. It had broken. Stone split beneath their feet. The forge shattered. The crater ruptured into a spiral of ruin. And rising from the chasm below, wrapped in black scales and dripping with time itself, came the thing they had tried not to name aloud. The Fellwyrm. Its body was impossibly long, coiled in endless loops, ribbed like the bones of 1,000 beasts. Its wings were not for flight, but for enveloping. Its face bore no eyes, only a mouth lined with rings of teeth, not for eating, but for speaking truths. Its presence was not physical. It was conceptual. It devoured meaning. It devoured endings. And now it was awake. It did not attack. It simply existed. And in doing so, the world around it began to unravel. Color bled from the sky. The wind forgot how to move. The sun dimmed. Even time itself stuttered, and for a moment they were children again, standing on a school field, laughing. Then they were nothing. Then they were old. Then the present returned, frayed. Alex stood before the crown, now half embedded in the stone. Jade fell to one knee, her mind spinning from visions she couldn't process. May screamed without sound, hands covering her ears from the pulse of the earth's pain. Ryan alone stood still, because the depth had shown him this. He turned toward the chasm, toward the Fellwyrm, and whispered, not aloud, but in thought, "We're not afraid." And from the far ridge, stepping down the spiral slope with quiet steps, came the crownbreaker. He wore the mask. He carried the staff. And in his hands, he held the fifth piece, the fragment he had stolen centuries ago, the heart of the original crown. It pulsed now, desperate to return. He looked at the four bearers and raised his hand. "You have come far," he said, not in mockery, not in hate, but in grief. "But you have not yet chosen." The world had not stopped, not in the physical sense, but it felt as though something fundamental had broken in the fabric of reality. The sky above the veil of cinders no longer moved. The clouds had frozen into a static canvas of charcoal streaks, unmoving and unblinking. Time passed, yes, but without rhythm. There was no wind, no shift in temperature. Only a crushing, suffocating stillness that wrapped around the soul and made every breath feel like inhaling dusted glass. The Fellwyrm lingered beneath the surface of the crater. Its presence alone distorted the land. Not in motion, but in meaning. What was once solid grew uncertain. Stone bent without cracking. Light bent without source. Sound grew hesitant. And every heartbeat seemed to echo not only in the chest, but in the earth. The creature did not roar or rise in full, but simply existed, a weight in the soul of the world. Every second it remained, the crown's glow dimmed as if recoiling. And now, descending into the crater with steps measured like grief, came the crownbreaker. He was not as the legends described him. No horned helm, no infernal blaze. He wore robes of deep gray, lined in golden seams dulled by age, frayed by time. His frame was not monstrous, but thin, tired, human in shape, if not in presence. His mask, smooth, featureless, metallic, reflected no light, only shadows. And in his hands, he carried something small, unassuming, a shard, jagged and black, barely the size of a heart. But the moment he raised it, the relics in each of the bearers pulsed in anguish. Alex stumbled back, clutching his chest as the core of flame flared and dimmed in rapid pulses. Jade gasped, her knees buckling as her vision blurred into a dozen fragmented timelines, all colliding. May dropped to the ground entirely, her palms slamming against the stone, trying to ground herself to the earth's voice, but even that had grown silent. And Ryan, though still standing, felt the depth turn cold, like a deep ocean frozen solid in an instant. The shard in the crownbreaker's hands was not just a missing piece. It was the soul of the crown. Without it, the relics had power. But with it, they had purpose. And now, the final decision had come. The crownbreaker did not raise his voice. He did not posture nor demand. He simply spoke, and the world listened. "Once I was like you." The words were quiet, flat, but they carried across the crater like a chorus, threading into the bones of the living stone. "I bore the flame. I sealed the storm. I drank the earth's sorrow and descended into depth. I stood with the others. We forged the crown. We ended the war." He took another step forward, the shard pulsing in his hands like a heartbeat removed from time. But the sealing did not destroy the Fellwyrm. It only delayed it. We knew this. The others chose to hope. I chose to remember. He turned his gaze, or what lay behind the mask, toward the four. This piece, this final fragment, it is not power. It is choice. The choice we denied ourselves when we sealed the Fellwyrm the first time. The Fellwyrm shifted below, its coils twisting beneath the surface of the stone like a serpent dreaming in fire. The crown can be reforged. With this shard, it will become whole. But the cost remains unchanged. He raised a hand, and the fractured memories of history unfolded behind him, visions cast into the air like flame. They saw the first four sealers, their faces noble, terrified, resolute. They stood where the bearers now stood, each consumed by the relics they bore, each turning to light as the crown sealed the creature below. To seal the Fellwyrm once more, the crownbreaker whispered, "3 of you must give yourselves to the crown. Not in death, but in unbeing." The word hit like a thunderclap. Not death, not martyrdom. Something worse. Something final. Your names will not be remembered. Your faces will vanish. You will become part of the seal. Part of the crown. Like I was meant to be. He lowered the shard slowly. But now you know what I learned too late. The crown does not destroy. It consumes. And once it is fed, it will hunger again. Alex stepped forward, his face pale but steady. "Then what are you saying?" The crownbreaker turned toward him. "I am saying that you must choose." The sky above them flickered. The Fellwyrm stirred again, rising just slightly, enough that a curve of its form pierced the surface, steaming and pulsing like a mountain made of flesh and shadow. Its presence bent the shape of the air, warping heat and sound around it. "You can finish what we started. Reforge the crown. Seal it. Sacrifice 3. One of you walks away, but the rest are gone. Forever." He paused and then continued. "Or you destroy the crown entirely. Shatter the relics. Face the Fellwyrm not with the power of the old world, but with the will of the living. And risk everything." No one spoke. Alex's hands clenched at his sides. Flame flickered around his wrists. He looked at Jade. She met his eyes with no certainty. She could no longer see ahead. She was blind to what came next. May's face was streaked with ash and sweat, her eyes unfocused, fingers twitching against the dead stone. And Ryan, though calm, bore the expression of someone who had already made peace with loss. "Why didn't you do it?" Alex asked finally, voice dry. "Why didn't you make the sacrifice?" The crownbreaker turned slowly. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Because I loved the world too much. Because I was weak." He let the words hang in the air like cinders. "But you do not have to be." And with that, he set the shard down atop the forge. It pulsed once, then fused into place. The crown was now whole. The choice lay before them. Reforge it. Seal the Fellwyrm. Lose 3. Or destroy it. Face the beast. Risk everything. And far below, the creature coiled tighter. Its hunger was eternal. Its patience was not. There are moments in a life that stretch beyond the limits of time, when seconds unfold like years and the air itself becomes thick with the weight of what must be chosen. And in the center of the crater, beneath a sky that no longer moved, the 4 bearers stood in such a moment. The crown, now whole, pulsed faintly atop the cracked forge. It shimmered not with beauty, but with finality. The wind did not return. The birds did not sing. There was only silence, and the breath of 4 hearts, and the memory of a world about to change. Alex stood furthest forward, jaw clenched, shoulders squared, the red glow of the core still burning within his chest. He did not tremble, but his body was rigid, the tension of a choice already weighed, already turning in his mind like a whetstone over steel. He had always believed in sacrifice, in doing what must be done for those who couldn't, in giving when others could not. But now, faced with the final cost, not just death but erasure, even his resolve bent. Who was he if not remembered? Could meaning survive without memory? And still, there was no hesitation in his gaze. Not yet. Jade stood near the forge, her hand brushing its edge, as if proximity might help her see beyond it. But the sky relic had gone quiet. Its once endless visions, the glimpses of possible futures, now sat behind a locked door she could no longer open. Her gift had shown her the paths that could be, but never the one she would take. Now, at the threshold of decision, she was just a girl with too much knowing and not enough time. She had seen the world burn in 100 ways. She had seen herself lost in the smoke. And the worst part was, she no longer feared it. May stood with her back turned, facing the walls of the crater where vines had once clung to stone. The earth relic hummed gently beneath her skin, not with pressure or demand, but with sadness. Too remembered what had come before, the sacrifices of the first sealers. The forests turned to ash, the silence left in their wake. May did not cry. Her eyes were dry, her breath slow, but the ache inside her had grown roots. She thought of home, not the world they came from, but the sketchbook in her satchel, filled with drawings of places she could never return to, places she'd tried to capture before they faded. And now, she wondered if anyone would ever see them again. And Ryan, Ryan stood furthest from the forge, closer to the lip of the crater, staring into the emptiness where the Fellwyrm moved like a wound beneath the world. The depth inside him did not scream, did not plead. It simply watched, and so did he, watching the curve of the earth, the silent ripple of heat, the subtle warp in reality where the creature's form brushed against the edge of understanding. He did not need to speak. The others could already feel his thoughts. For of them all, Ryan had made peace with the choice long before they arrived. No words passed between them, not for minutes, perhaps longer. There was no need to speak aloud what each already knew, that the reforging would demand three, that the destruction of the crown would demand all. That one path was certainty, the other a gamble, but both carried loss. And then, finally, Alex broke the silence. Not with a speech, not with poetry or grandeur, just a breath and a statement. "I'll do it." He stepped forward, 1 foot near the crown, the glow in his chest deepening. His tone did not tremble, but beneath it there was pain. He did not look back at them. "It's the only way to end this. One of us has to make it out." Might as well be someone who can carry the story forward. Jade turned to him, her voice soft, nearly lost in the still air. "You don't get to decide alone." May moved beside them, placing one hand on the forge, feeling its warmth bleed into her fingers. "We all came here together." But Ryan didn't step forward. He stayed at the edge. And then, finally, he spoke. "What if we don't?" The question cut through them more sharply than any weapon. He turned to face them. "What if we don't seal it again? What if we stop running the same cycle? What if we destroy it? The crown, the relics, all of it." Alex frowned, but didn't interrupt. The seal didn't kill it. It just buried it. And we've been living in the shadow of that choice ever since. Pretending the world is safe when really, it's just delayed. Jade looked away, eyes narrowed. "But if we destroy the crown, there's no second chance. If we fail..." Ryan nodded. "Then we fail together. But we stop lying to ourselves. We stop passing the burden to the next generation like a curse they never asked for." The silence that followed was heavier than before. The crownbreaker watched from behind his mask, unmoving, unreadable. He had said his part. The choice was no longer his to make. And slowly, May stepped back from the forge. She turned to Ryan, then looked at the others. "I don't want to be remembered in silence." Alex's fists clenched. He looked at the crown, then at his friends. Then he cursed under his breath, turned away from the forge, and joined them. Jade was last. Her hand lingered on the edge of the stone, her thoughts 1,000 miles away. She closed her eyes, and she let go. They stood now not as bearers, but as themselves. Not legends, not chosen, just for souls choosing hope over history. Ryan stepped forward and raised his hand toward the crown. Not to claim it, but to break it. The depth flared in his chest. Alex added his flame. May reached through the stone. Jade let the storm in her blood find its voice. And together, all four, they struck. The crown shattered. Not in light, not in thunder, but in silence. A silence that reached the ends of the world. And the Fellwyrm screamed. The moment the crown shattered, the world forgot how to breathe. There was no blast, no quake, no cry of triumph, only a stillness so vast it hollowed the sky. The forge cracked inwards, the broken shards of the crown sinking into the stone like embers falling into water. The light of the relics dimmed. The grooves where they had pulsed now bled nothingness, as if the magic had not dispersed but ceased. Around the four bearers, the air thickened not with heat or smoke, but with something older than either. Something wrong. The Fellwyrm stirred. It did not rise like a beast disturbed from slumber, nor charge with the frenzy of a monster unleashed. It uncoiled slowly, deliberately, like a god remembering it had a body. From the depths of the crater came the sound of shifting bones too massive to comprehend, the creak of time itself grinding open. The crater split further, the ground fracturing in perfect silence, and then something vast moved beneath the surface, a shape so massive it could not be seen all at once. Only glimpses, a tail wrapped in spirals, a limb like a cathedral, a head crowned with bone where eyes should be. The sky darkened, though no cloud moved. And then, finally, the Fellwyrm rose. It did not emerge. It became visible. Where there had once been the illusion of horizon and sky, now there was a shape blacker than shadow, rimmed in iridescent fire, its very outline bleeding into unreality. Its wings unfolded but never flapped, unfurling like galaxies swallowed by gravity. And its mouth ringed with rows upon rows of shifting teeth, opened not in a roar, but in a pulse, a wave of unmaking. The blast struck the walls of the crater and they vanished. Not shattered, vanished. The wind did not carry the shockwave. The world simply no longer contained the space it touched. Alex was the first to act. The core of flame inside him still burned, barely alive, flickering like a candle in a hurricane. He drew the fire out through his arms, through his chest, and cast it in a wave before them, not as an attack, but a barrier. The fire warped the edges of the Fellwyrm's breath, buying them a breath. Only a breath. Jade followed, raising both hands and drawing the last remnants of the sky's relic into the air. A shield of crackling wind formed overhead, fragile and thin, like a spider's web against a meteor. But it held. For now. May dropped to her knees, slamming her palms into the ground. From deep beneath the veil, roots older than memory surged upward, forming twisted walls of petrified bark. They encircled the group, forming a dome. But already the ground was rotting beneath them, not from poison, but from conceptual decay. The land knew it was dying. Ryan didn't move. He stood at the center, eyes closed, hands open at his sides. The depth had gone silent, but now it returned. Not as a voice, not as power, but as understanding. In the brief moment of quiet between pulses, he saw the truth, the final layer. The Fellwyrm was not a creature. It was not an enemy. It was a memory. The memory of every war ever fought. Every sacrifice ever wasted. Every truth buried for peace. It was the price of forgetting. And it had been sealed again and again, not to protect the world, but to keep the illusion alive. To destroy it now was not to kill a beast, but to confront every lie the world had built itself upon. Ryan opened his eyes. "It doesn't want to destroy us," he said softly. "It wants us to remember." Alex turned to him, sweat streaking through the ash on his face. "It's killing everything." Ryan shook his head. "No, it's undoing everything. Every unspoken cost. Every ignored sacrifice. Every false ending." Jade's hands trembled. "Then what do we do?" Ryan stepped forward through the veil of flame and root toward the creature. "We accept it." No one spoke. No one stopped him. He walked to the edge of the crater, now fully collapsed into a chasm that stretched into nothing. The Fellwyrm turned toward him, not physically, but in perception. Its body did not shift, but Ryan knew it saw him. "We were told we had to choose who to forget," Ryan said aloud. "But that's not the truth, is it?" The creature pulsed again. This time, no destruction came. Instead, Ryan stepped forward. "We're not afraid of remembering anymore." Behind him, Alex dropped to one knee, his flame flickering wildly. Jade sat, exhausted, breath shallow. May collapsed fully, her eyes closed, lips moving in a silent prayer to the soil. And Ryan let the depth take him. He opened himself not to power, not to force, but to truth. And in that moment, the Fellwyrm paused. It tilted its head. And slowly, the rot stopped. The roots held. The sky flickered. Time resumed. Ryan's body lifted from the ground, not by force, but by memory. He saw them all, the old sealers, the dead kings, the burned forests, the children who never returned. He saw the lie of peace and the cost of silence. And he spoke their names. All of them. One by one. Each name returned was a flame relit. A root healed. A star remembered. The Fellwyrm screamed, but it was not rage. It was release. Its coils unwound. Its wings folded. Its form began to shrink, collapsing inward, not from destruction, but completion. It had never been meant to be killed. It had only waited to be heard. When the Fellwyrm vanished, the world did not return to what it had been. It became something new. There was no final explosion, no climactic burst of light or fire, no glorious crescendo to mark its defeat. Instead, the great coiled body that had once filled the crater began to unspool into dust. Not ash, not blood, but memory, pieces of time unwrapping themselves from flesh. With each curl that dissolved into the air, pieces of the old world fluttered out with it. Whispers of long-lost cities, fallen warriors, children whose names had never been spoken aloud. It was as if the creature had held history hostage, and now, with its final breath, it was releasing the weight of everything forgotten. And in the center of that unraveling stood Ryan. His body floated inches above the earth, but he no longer glowed. The depth inside him had quieted into a calm sea, no longer vast, no longer terrifying. His eyes remained open, but they saw something no one else could. And on his face, for the first time since they arrived in this dying world, there was peace. He lowered gently to the ground as the last of the Fellwyrm dissolved into particles that drifted upward, not like smoke, but like starlight rising from the soil. The blackened crater shimmered with that same energy, not magic but memory, like the land itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too many centuries. The earth didn't erupt into bloom. It didn't restore itself like in some storybook ending, but it breathed. That was enough. Jade rose slowly to her feet. Her hands no longer crackled with skyfire. The visions had stopped, not because the power was gone, but because the uncertainty had ended. For so long she had lived in a constant barrage of possible tomorrows, 1,000 threads unraveling across her mind like a web she could never control. Now, for the first time, the web had gone still. She couldn't see ahead anymore, but neither did she need to. The path forward was no longer written. And in that uncertainty, she found a kind of quiet joy. Alex stumbled as the core of flame within him extinguished at last. His legs shook under him, and when he fell to his knees, he didn't fight it. He let the weight drop him. He didn't feel empty. He felt clean, as if the fire had finally burned away all that was brittle and left behind only truth. He looked around the crater, not for enemies, not for threats, but for his friends. They were all still breathing, all still standing. That was enough. May lay flat on her back, eyes closed, her fingers buried in the earth beneath her. It was no longer scorched. Beneath the top layer of blackened stone, she felt life, small, distant, but alive. Something green, something rooted. The earth relic had not returned to her. It was gone, but the land still knew her. It would remember her long after her name was lost. That was enough. Above them, the sky remained a gray amber for a long time. Then slowly it lightened. A pale sun, not golden, but soft like morning mist, pushed through the clouds. Not warm, not triumphant, but gentle. And from the far side of the crater, the crownbreaker stood in silence. He had not moved during the entire confrontation. He had watched, hands folded, as the thing he had once feared had been unmade not by sealing, but by acceptance. Now he stepped forward. The mask remained on his face, but his voice had changed. No longer hollow or grand, just human. You did what we could not. Ryan turned toward him, but said nothing. We tried to save the world by sealing its pain. You saved it by facing it. He stepped closer. The broken pieces of the crown still lay on the stone. Shards of something once revered, now meaningless. He looked down at them. The relics will not return. Not in this form. Jade looked toward the sky. We didn't want them to. The crownbreaker looked at each of them in turn. Then, slowly, he reached up and removed his mask. The man beneath was old. His skin weathered not by time, but by sorrow. His eyes, one gray, one clouded, looked tired, but relieved. He dropped the mask beside the broken crown. The kingdoms will wake again. They will remember. May pushed herself upright, arms trembling. They should. The world deserves to know. The crownbreaker nodded once. Then your part here is finished. Alex stood, wiping ash from his hands. Can we go back? The man smiled faintly. You never left. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the edge of the crater, where the cracked stone now shimmered with faint outlines, not of portals, but of doors. They flickered like mirages, shifting with memory, each one shaped by the hearts of the four bearers. A bedroom door, a classroom entrance, a back gate to a park, cafe window, each one familiar, each one theirs. The world you knew still exists, changed, but waiting. Jade stepped toward her door. So did May. Alex remained behind for a moment, staring down at the pieces of the crown. Was it all real? He asked, not to anyone in particular. Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder. What do you think? Alex closed his eyes, then nodded. They stepped through together. And just like that, the crater was empty, the relics gone, the forge dark, the memory sealed not by magic, but by choice. High above, the sun rose fully for the first time in an age. And far across the lands once blackened by the Fellwyrm, old bells began to ring again. Not in warning, but in welcome. The return was not like waking from a dream. It wasn't sudden and it wasn't soft. It was like falling, slowly, through layers of warmth and cold, memory and silence, as if the world were reweaving itself around them. There was no swirl of magic, no blinding light or loud sound. Instead, the world they had known, their real world, came back one detail at a time. A floor beneath their feet, the smell of pencil shavings, the dim hum of fluorescent lights, the subtle, soulless tick of a classroom wall clock. And then came the wait. Each of the four woke not in beds, not in hospital rooms, but in the same place they had vanished from, their school's library. The room was still, empty. A faint beam of late afternoon sun sliced through dust that hung lazily in the air. Nothing looked different, no shattered windows, no signs of time having passed at all. It was as if they had simply fallen asleep, as if no one had missed them, but they had changed. Alex sat up first, clutching his chest, expecting fire, but finding only a dull echo. His heart still beat fast, his breath still shallow, but the core of flame was gone. No ember remained inside him, but a warmth lingered as though part of him still remembered what it meant to burn. He looked at his hands scarless. Normal. Yet nothing about him felt normal. He could still hear the roar of the Fellwyrm in his bones, could still see the dome of petrified root May had raised, could still feel the weight of Jade's hand on his shoulder when the crown cracked. Jade stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans, her eyes scanning the room. Her senses reached out instinctively, searching for signs, for the pressure of futures unspooling like threads. But there was nothing. No storm. No visions. Just the quiet reality of a world that had never known the weight of what they carried. The sky relic was gone, but her mind remained changed, too quiet now, like a theater after the final act, filled with the echoes of 100 voices that had finally stopped shouting. May leaned against a table, her breath caught between sob and sigh. She bent down, placing a palm on the tile floor. Cold. Still. Lifeless. It had none of the thrum of the veil of cinders, none of the subtle pulse of the green root valley, or the ache of the stone path beneath the forge. The earth was not awake here, but she had brought its memory with her. A gentle hum still nestled in her spine. A phantom comfort. And Ryan. He stood last. Not with awe or confusion, but calm. His eyes were quiet, unreadable. The depth was gone, but the knowing had remained. He did not search for signs. He didn't check his surroundings. He simply stared at the clock on the wall, the same one that had always ticked, the same one that hadn't changed since the day they disappeared. Only now it felt wrong. He turned to the others. I don't think anyone knows we were gone. The silence that followed confirmed it. The world was untouched. No alarms. No search parties. No disarray. Whatever they had endured, whatever they had done, had happened in a fold of time no one else had witnessed. They had returned to a world that had simply kept turning. And now they were the only ones who remembered what had nearly unmade everything. They walked through the school's empty hallway like shadows, half expecting the walls to peel back and reveal some hidden scar. But nothing came. The lockers stood in place. The posters on the wall still advertised last week's math competition. The silence was ordinary, mundane. And that, more than anything, was horrifying. Outside, the sun hung low in the sky, casting the quad in lazy gold. Students milled around the school's front steps, chatting, laughing, scrolling through their phones. The four watched from the shadows of the doorway, hidden but present. None of them could move. Not yet. Alex finally spoke, his voice rough. So that's it? We just come back? Pretend none of it happened? Jade shook her head slowly. We don't pretend. But we don't explain either. They wouldn't understand. May's voice was small. What if it comes back? Ryan answered without hesitation. It won't. But there was no triumph in his tone. Only quiet certainty. We didn't seal it. We let it go. The world's different now, even if it doesn't know it yet. They left the school together, walking side by side down the street as students passed them, oblivious. There was no magical glow in the sky. No news alerts. No earthquakes or blackened skies. But the weight followed them. It would always follow them. Not as a curse, but as a reminder. Later that night, each of them lay in their own rooms under their own ceilings, surrounded by the familiarity of home. And each, in their own way, struggled to sleep, not because of nightmares, but because the silence was too deep. Jade stared at the moon, wondering how many of the stars above had watched the Fellwyrm wake. Alex traced a scar that wasn't there on his arm, remembering how it had felt to burn for someone else. May planted her hand into a pot of soil on her windowsill, half hoping it would answer. And Ryan sat at his desk, writing down every name he could remember, every sealer, every fallen warrior, every forgotten village. Because if the crown had taught them anything, it was that memory was power, and they would not forget. In the days that followed their return, the world continued its rhythm, ordinary, unbroken, uncaring. But beneath that surface, just barely beneath, something had shifted. The four bearers, once tethered to powers ancient and vast, now walked hallways and sidewalks as normal students again, indistinguishable from the rest. Yet none of them could deny it. The world might not have remembered what happened, but it felt it. It began with the sky. Jade noticed it first, lying awake as usual in the early hours before dawn. The stars overhead flickered in unfamiliar patterns. Not random, not chaotic, but rewritten. As if the constellations themselves had been gently nudged, their shapes subtly changed. She traced them with her fingers from behind her bedroom window, and for a moment, one of the stars pulsed as if answering. A heartbeat, a whisper of what had been. The storm was gone from her blood, but the sky still knew her name. In the forest behind May's neighborhood, a tree bloomed out of season. Not a tree she recognized. Its bark was dark gray, streaked with pale veins like marble. Its branches curved with impossible symmetry, and its leaves shimmered with green and silver at once. May felt it before she saw it. Pull not urgent but familiar. She wandered into the woods without knowing why, and when she touched the trunk, the soil beneath her hummed with something ancient and welcoming. She cried there for a long time, not from sadness, but from the ache of returning to something that no longer needed her, but remembered her all the same. For Alex, the change came in flame. In shop class, his hands hovered too close to the open flame of a small welding torch, and it didn't burn him. It should have. He had done it by accident. But the fire simply bent around him, as if recognizing its former master. The teacher barked a warning, and Alex apologized quickly. But later, alone, he tried again. And the flame pulsed once, then danced for him, just slightly, just enough to remind him. The core of flame may be gone, but its final ember lived on inside him. Not a weapon, not a relic, a truth. And Ryan did not speak of what he saw. He stopped sleeping, not from nightmares, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the depth. Not as power, not as magic, but as understanding. He could read the silence in people's voices, the sorrow behind a smile, the weight in a teacher's sigh, or the anger wrapped in another student's laughter. The world no longer spoke in noise to him, it spoke in absence. And though he was not afraid, the loneliness that came with that clarity was immense. But he never told the others. They didn't need to know. What mattered was this. Though they had destroyed the crown, though they had broken the relics, the memory of what they had done remained. Etched not in history books, but in the subtle changes of the world. And then, on the seventh night after their return, something new happened. Jade was the first to receive it. At exactly 2:47 a.m., her phone buzzed with a single notification. Unknown number. One message. The gate in the north is stirring. She stared at it for a long time. No link. No sender. Just the words. She didn't delete it. The next morning, May arrived to school looking pale and shaken. She had found something buried beneath the roots of the strange tree. A shard of stone, carved with the same runes they had seen in the Vale of Cinders. She didn't know what it meant, only that it wasn't there before. Alex confessed he'd seen fire burning in a rain puddle. He hadn't touched it, but he knew. The barrier between worlds was thinner, and Ryan finally spoke. We broke the crown, but the world it was forged to protect. It's waking up. It's remembering itself. They sat together that afternoon beneath the old clock tower in town, the same one they had walked past 100 times. Now it felt ancient, watching, as if it had always been more than brick and iron, waiting for them to understand. Do we go back? Alex asked, voice quiet. Jade answered without turning. What if it's not a matter of going back, but being called? May held the runestone tightly, her knuckles white. I don't think it's over. Ryan stood, hands in his pockets, eyes on the sky that now looked unfamiliar. Then we wait, and when the next crack opens, we don't walk through it unprepared. Jade raised a brow. Prepared how? We don't have the relics. We don't have powers. Ryan turned to her, and this time he smiled. We don't need them. There was no thunderclap, no world-ending scream, just the quiet knowledge among the four of them that the story was not done. The world had remembered, and it would call again. The wind felt different that morning, not stronger, not colder, but older, as though it had passed through places that didn't exist on maps, and carried with it the dust of a world long buried under silence. It swept through the town without urgency, threading through alleys and rustling trees, brushing over rooftops and catching the edges of coats and hair, touched everything but spoke only to four. They all felt it. Alex stood on the edge of the old sports field, staring at the tree line where the sun barely glinted through the leaves. The fire in him had gone quiet again, but the wind stirred the back of his neck like a whisper calling to an ember still buried deep. He closed his eyes. He didn't see fire or monsters. He saw the forge, the crown, the moment he'd almost given everything, and the choice not to. The regret no longer stung, but it lingered, like heat after a burn. May was already awake, fingers sunk into the soil of her garden. She had planted nothing, and yet green shoots now rose, in perfect circles, patterns too symmetrical to be natural. The ground hummed faintly beneath her, and as she leaned closer, she could hear it. A pulse, one not of blood or stone, but of invitation. Jade sat at the top of the school stairwell, her knees hugged to her chest. In her lap was an old astronomy book, but she wasn't reading it. Her eyes were fixed on the sky. The stars, even in daylight, still whispered to her. Not in visions, not in prophecy, but in possibility. They moved now sometimes, not randomly, not wrongly, but deliberately, like they were watching back. Ryan walked along the empty bike path behind town, his footsteps slow. He no longer feared the silence. It walked beside him. It was him now. The depth had never truly left. It had simply changed. It no longer gave him voices or power, but it gave him clarity. And today, it whispered three words, again and again, in a place deeper than thought. It is time. The four met without speaking. No plan, no text, no call, just gravity, not of space, but of bond. They arrived at the same place where the veil had first thinned, the clearing behind the clock tower, where the roots of the world once split apart to call them through. Now there stood a door, not a glowing portal, not a tear in the sky, a door, wooden, weathered, framed in black iron, no wall around it, no hinges, just a door standing in the middle of the clearing, untouched by wind, unmarked by time. But it called, and around its edges, the faint shimmer of memory pulsed. Gold, green, silver, crimson. The crown was gone, the relics destroyed, but the world they had saved was not. And now it remembered them. Alex stepped forward first, his hand hovering just above the iron handle. We said we weren't going back. May joined him, standing beside the door, brushing her fingers over its surface. We said we'd be ready, if it called. Jade folded her arms, eyes narrowed. We don't know what's on the other side. Ryan, silent as ever, simply placed his hand on the wood and said, "That's the point." They stood there, the four of them, not as chosen ones or bearers, but as witnesses, as survivors, as the only ones who remembered what the world had almost lost. No relics hummed in their bodies, no magic pulsed in their veins, but they had something stronger now, something older than power. Conviction. Alex turned the handle, and the door creaked open. Beyond it, not light, not darkness, but a forest, alive, breathing, waiting. The trees were taller than towers, their bark streaked with silver, their leaves humming in winds that didn't touch this world. Paths stretched in all directions, some of dirt, some of stone, some of firefly-lit moss. And in the distance, far beyond, something moved. Not a threat, not a monster, but a shape, presence. And just like before, the world called. But this time, it didn't ask for sacrifice. It asked for companionship. It asked for remembrance. The four stepped through together, and the door closed behind them, not with finality, but with hope. For the world beyond the crown had only just begun.